welcome to another Luain Press podcast. Very excited today as we have a very important guest. We have Alvy Carragher. I am pronouncing that right, Carragher.
Carragher.
Welcome, Alvy, to the podcast. How's things?
Good, yeah. How are you?
Not so bad. Yeah, no, I'm very excited. I read your book here. What Remains the Same. Um, and I was surprised halfway through to discover that, because I was like, Alvy, I've never heard of anyone called Alvy. Alvy is such a unique name, but Alva, it's actually short for Alva.
Well, no, it's not
Oh,
short for that.
oh
No,
right. Oh, sorry.
when I went, it was I was christened Alva, and when I went to school, I found out because my name I was registered under that, but I had been called Alvy my whole life, and
Right.
I think partially because my father is from England. And I don't know if my mother knew how to pronounce it. I don't know how good her Irish was. So they were saying Alvy, even though like my granny would argue with them that they were pronouncing my name wrong. So when I went to school, I discovered I was being called the wrong thing, but I preferred what I had been called because I've been called that for 4 years. So
Yeah. Yeah.
we stuck with that. Yeah.
So your father's from England and your mother, she's from Galway.
No, she's from Offaly. She's from Burr.
Oh,
She's
from Bern.
a great Offaly family, the Bullfins.
Oh, very good. Very
If
good.
you know of them, they're in the Rising.
Yeah. No, I worked in Offaly for a time, but never came across anyone by the name. But yeah, Alvy, yeah, lovely name. So Alvy, you won the Evan Bowling Board this year. So how does that? How do you feel? Such a big
Oh, I
thing.
have to say Poetry Ireland Evan Boland Award.
Okay.
Uh,
Oh, sorry.
Specifically, yeah, sorry. It was surprising, but good. I'm away to Manchester in 2 weeks. I haven't done any of the stuff really related to it yet. So I guess I'll know afterwards. Right now it's a bit daunting because it's a lot of stuff I wouldn't normally do. I'll be like shadowing maybe John McAuliffe over there in the Manchester University, and then I think there's some stuff to do with the Evan Boland inaugural festival next April. But it also feels like a very big what would you call it? Just worried about, conducting yourself well under the time under her name,
Yeah.
given, what an incredible poet she was and all that she did for young poets in the country.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, I suppose it's probably the biggest award that you've gotten so far. Do you feel like when you win something like that, there's more pressure sort of on you in general, like to, I suppose, creatively and things like that? How do you feel about that sort of thing?
I think you just have more external commitments. So your calendar gets a little bit busy for a while, but that it will pass. So you just
Hmm.
do what you can to make the best of them, and then you can get back into being forgotten about when it's over.
Yeah. Um,
I think, yeah.
yeah, that's a nice way of putting it, actually, I suppose. Um, are you happy working away, sort of in that forgotten state? Is that the ideal state to be in, I suppose, when you're working or
Oh yeah, I like to go full hermit, but it's not always very practical. And I do work kind of 3 days of the week doing copy editing, so I already have fairly big commitments with that. And then I try to write 3 days of the week and take a break. But like for me, if I don't write, if I go a certain number of days without writing, I feel almost ill. So I think it is one of my main coping mechanisms. I don't publish it all, obviously,
yeah.
but I do write all the time, so I can't really, I've never really been able to go without it. So if I get really busy, I then have to look ahead in my calendar and block out huge chunks of time for just writing where I'm not allowed to say yes to anything else.
Yeah, that's you do feel a sort of a nagging guilt if you go a few days without it, or yeah, I suppose life is hectic sometimes, but what can you do? But yeah, no, I really enjoyed your book. What Remains the Same. Um, just for the listeners, I only met Alvy for the first time in Kilcock the other week. Um, the Poetry Gillen Collective were hosting an open mic event, and I was very impressed just by your reading and the various different poems. Um, I was disappointed though. I have to say, page 55. The poem bookmarks. He said, "I leave dog ears," and I was like, "Oh no, you're not one of those people." Uh, Dog ears. Yeah, no, I just yeah, I'm more of a bookmark kind of guy because I don't know. I just feel yeah, but there you
Well,
go.
even in poetry books. So the thing with poetry books is that I have quite a lot of poetry books, and then if I'm going back to them to find the poems that I really liked in a particular collection or anthology, it's much easier to have dog ears, and it goes much further than dog ears. Some of them are like little accordion dog ears because
Oh,
if I give it like three folds, that means I love this poem. Like
oh,
I really
geez,
want.
yeah, maybe you don't have enough bookmarks in the house. But as you say in the poem, you got people use receipts and everything. I've been guilty of that using receipts the odd time and stuff. But
Well, I'm kind of a person who would probably they would probably drop out of the book and I wouldn't notice. And I also loan books a lot. So
yeah,
although I have to give a kind of a trigger warning for people like you who might be wary of the dog ear.
yeah, no, yeah. My sister as well. She's against dog ears, but sure. Oh, look, at least I suppose it's better than not reading books at all. That's the way to look at it. So yeah, I was reading your bio, and you said you lived in Louisiana, South Korea, Canada. So you've been all over the world. Um, where was your favorite place? And yeah, I suppose I'll leave it at that. Where was your favorite place to be, of all those?
Not to live long term, but because I don't have the language, but I loved South Korea, probably because it was a very hermit-like existence. We lived down in rural, like a rural, just the peninsula at the end of the country, and it's like a 2 hour bus to any kind of proper civilization. I mean, it's still a fairly big town by Irish standards, 30,000, I think, but there's not a lot of amenities or that. So really you kind of you are teaching full time, but there's a lot of desk warming, which means you have a lot of time to write. So I think I have fond memories of there. Also, I loved the culture and the food, um, and even just the way, I didn't always understand what was going on because it's very subtle and it's a huge cultural difference. But what I did understand, I really liked. It's very considerate. People are very, very considerate there.
People are very considerate in South Korea. Okay, yeah, 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 South Korea. I was tempted once to go there to teach, but yeah, I remember talking to a guy in college about it. He taught there for a few years, and he said he did enjoy it, but he said it's very sort of it's a strange place in that it is very high. Like depression is a big thing there as well for a lot of people and stuff. So it's a sort of a yeah. He said it was tough.
But that's the long term thing, I wouldn't because you do become more aware of it the longer you're there. And also, although you have a lot of desk time, your students don't necessarily. So if you're in any way empathetic, just watching 11-year-olds who are doing minimum 12 hours a day seems insane. They're in school all day and then they go to these hagwons to do another stint and then they would go after that home to do their homework. And it just felt like anything that you gave them, I would always try to never give homework because to give them homework would be to just add to this burden. And a lot of the English teaching there, the way that you teach them is kind of supposed to make them enjoy the language a little bit more. So they say you're not so much a teacher as an English clown. So
okay.
I don't know if I necessarily had the perfect disposition for such a kind of
A role.
loud
Oh yeah.
role.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. But you enjoyed it anyway. And in Louisiana and Canada, were you teaching there as well, or were you there for different reasons? Or
No, in Louisiana, I was on a sports scholarship. So that was when I was 19 to 21 for athletics. And then Canada, my partner works in film. So we went there. So it's North Hollywood. So we went there and he worked in Vancouver and Toronto uh, first on film sets and then in kind of post-production. But we decided to come back afterwards because you're really just everything that you do over there, you feel sort of like a cog in a very big corporate wheel, even doing creative work, it's all very commercialized. So can be kind of take, I guess, a little bit of the joy out of it.
yeah. So you're a home bird at heart.
Yeah.
That's no harm, I suppose. That's no harm. So yeah, I suppose we maybe we'll start. by maybe we can read a poem from the collection if you'd like. I don't know if there's any particular poem that your favorite poem or anything, but if there's anything maybe for our readers just to get an idea of what it's about or the vibe, you know.
I don't mind. Did you have one in mind you wanted to hear, or I can choose?
Not particularly. I mean, if there was one that you wanted,
Um, there's a lot that I read often because people like them. I suppose one that I read that a lot of people probably get is Mother Speaks Across Oceans, near the end of the book. So
oh,
that was written in Toronto after my granny had died, and it's about a phone call with my mother, and I'm more or less estranged. Well, I'm very estranged now, but at the time of writing this, it was kind of, I suppose, tentative. But there had been a massive kind of breakdown in the relationship. So Mother Speaks Across Oceans. It's the deep sigh of midwinter when she calls to say her mother is dead. We're in familiar waters, the intimacy of her voice after so long, ocean in my ear. I ask if they made peace, a pause. Before the end, her mother apologized for not seeing. It has to be enough. She's just glad that place isn't a place anymore. I guess she means girlhood. My mind moves through cold corridors to a child's bed, ocean in my throat. She describes the final hours, how she refused sleep, somehow knowing this was her mother's last hour. She was the only one to witness her mother fixate on the light. I don't believe a word of it. Her stamp is all over the details. It's like a storybook, colourful, triumphant. A cartoon death, a ghost in the wrong shoes, singing off key. Ocean in my chest. She is relieved it's over. I say, I don't think grief works that way. There's nothing dismissible in its hollow vowels, slumped shoulders. The line is silent. Ocean in my hands. Her voice again, an anecdote. It's as if she didn't hear me. This happened once before and long ago. I gave up speaking. I let her words enter. It didn't matter what I said. She spoke over me, her voice rising like the tide.
thank you for reading that. Yeah, it must be a very 'cause I think when I mentioned Kakaki, I think you alluded to the that you were estranged from your mother and stuff. So that must be difficult for you to I like poems like that. Do they take a sort of a few years to sort of manifest, or are they something that you can just sit down and write? Or
It depends on the poem. Sometimes they come as just a sort of, they pour out, and then other times you kind of know there's an instant or a moment. And I suppose how I would know is that my brain just keeps going over and over the memory. And so with that, I think it took a few months, but I was trying to avoid writing about it. And it's not like you have that much control when it comes to poetry. Once you try to start avoiding a poem, you can't write any other poems. So I think I was just haunted by the manner of the call for so long. And then I thought, well, just sit down and write it out, and you don't have to do anything with it. And it doesn't have to be a poem. And then, of course, once it's on the page, some other part of you comes in. That knows how to shape and control it and turn it into something that you're able to understand. Because normally you're trying to tell yourself something, and I suppose the thing that you have to get to in any poem is the swerve, or the turn, and when it turns, when it says, I don't believe a word of it. I mean, that was something I was probably thinking about the call, but not admitting to myself until I wrote it. And then once you have written it down, and you have to think about what you actually want to say about what is just, regurgitation of a memory. And then you think, but what is it that needs to be transformed here? And I think it's allowing in your voice or what you think of a situation, for me anyway. I mean, I think it's very different from for different poets, but I have read this amazing thing recently from an American poet called Phyllis Levine. She's speaking specifically about sonnets, but she describes the swerve or the turn. I mean, my whole life, this is the thing that I love in other people's poems and that I try to get to. You don't always get a good one, but she described it as the seat of the soul. So for me, that opens up this whole thing when I'm writing of, well, if I was going to sit my soul down now in the middle of this, where would it be sitting and what would it be saying? So yeah.
Yeah, that's a nice, nice way of looking at it. And it's strange, like we read over the collection, it's sort of, um, like for example, it's a sort of a strange maybe relationship you have with your mother. You talk, I think reduction. Um, you look at your well, my interpretation anyway, when you're looking at your mother as she's portrayed as a person that you want to see succeed, but it feels as if she's maybe we see her then the same woman in poems like I'm Sure and in Marrow, and we see this sort of fear and instability as well. So there's that kind of dynamic going on in this one person. Um, and yeah, I suppose it's yeah. Do you, any comments on that, or I suppose any thoughts on that maybe, or
Well, I think I grew up in a house where mental health was probably very precarious, so that there was, um, huge complications or contradictions in most of the people that I knew growing up. And my parents were definitely suffering in their own way, and trying maybe not to repeat history, and in doing, but managing to do so. And I suppose one of the really complicated things about my relationship with my mother is that I probably did everything I was told for a very long time, and I would have done everything in my power from a very small, young age, as the eldest of four, to make her life easier. And yet, still, there would be these sorts of breakdowns, and you can't control everything as a child, and you can't um, sort of sandpaper the world down to something smooth and easy to traverse for other people. And it took me a long time to learn that. And I suppose in my very first collection, there is a poem about my mother that says something like, "You didn't like the way I wrote you." And it's all about taking poems out and putting in ones she likes, or a version of herself that she liked, because I think, she got pregnant at 19 and had her life completely derailed and married a man she never should have married. But it was in Ireland where she didn't really have another choice. And then, as a result, we all grew up under his reign of, I don't know what you would call it, but in a very complicated household where, she was the safest option, but she wasn't necessarily a safe option.
yeah. I mean, saying that when you said you know you were doing everything she was telling you to do, and trying to, I suppose, trying to be a good daughter, I suppose, and then but when you grow up, then you kind of and you can see things from an adult perspective. You think, well, actually, no, that wasn't maybe you know ideal, or the right way. Yeah. So yeah, it hits home a lot. Yeah, it does. It's and it must be there must be you must find some liberation in writing about these things and just getting them out on the page. It must be freeing.
Yeah. Um, Part of it as well is that it sort of connects you into the world in a way that, in those environments where everything is, and it's very common in Irish households, things are not spoken about, and it's changing, but, we're probably the first generation that has been able to avail of substantial amounts of therapy or conversations around mental health. But people were just going to the priest before that for confession, and, they could not be themselves. And so for us to all come along, and we're going to be ourselves at all costs because we've grown up on American media and this other idea of the self being important. And it's not wrong, but it is causing huge fractures in a society that was very closed in, very secretive, and for very good reasons. And so I think in the collection, one of the things I was trying to do was show that it's not, in the individual, there is the sort of universal. And there's not many people I know that don't have very dark and sad pasts somewhere in their family history. And I think that's why people connect to poems like the one that I read, because it's a like what is it when we say those kinds of things about our life, and what does it mean for our families and ourselves? And you have to hope that it means that we can be more open moving forward, but we don't know yet what all this
Yeah,
will lead to.
yeah, that's true. Absolutely. I was surprised actually when I just I suppose I was looking through your different books on your website, and am I right in saying your first book was actually a children's book?
No, the first book was a poetry book,
Sorry,
and my
poetry, yeah,
second book was a children's novel. Yeah.
children's novel, yeah.
The Well, it
Um,
was kind of young adult, so it reads like a proper novel. It's just for a younger age group. Like it's not a picture book or anything like that.
okay. Um, so would you class yourself primarily as a poet, but down the line maybe have you do you dabble with fiction still, or is that on the cards at all, or
Yeah, I'm working on a collection of short stories that I need to start sending out soon. The only problem is I am incapable of writing a short story, which you would think would be easy for a poet because it's like the next longest. But for some reason, I'm falling in between just over a short story and just under a novella. So it's sort of like a cluster of uh, terribly, like the length of all of them is so bad. It's just nobody wants this length. So I'm going to have to make them into a book to be able to get them out, I think, because I don't think a journal is going to publish like a 10,000 word story or a 15,000 one.
yeah, well, The Dead by James Joyce. I think that's 15,000
I mean,
words.
you can pull up the exceptions, but I
Yeah,
think you have to consider that you're probably not the exception to the rule when there's so many people writing now and submitting, and usually they're going to want to showcase as kind of as many as possible in the journal.
possibly. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. If they're good stories, I suppose it should. If they're 10,000, I mean, you could fit like five or six 10,000 word stories into a book. But then, yeah, that's cool though. Yeah, I suppose. And you said you think it would be easy. I don't know. Short stories, I teach. I teach in a secondary school. I actually discourage a lot of kids from taking the short story route with the Leaving Cert option because I just think it's an unless they're very confident, But it's a hard thing to do. Like never mind under exam conditions, but just in general, I think
Yeah,
it's very hard
you
to do.
discourage them
I don't
just for
discourage.
fun.
No, no, but I don't discourage. I might say I think the personal essay might be a safer choice. I say if you're confident, absolutely go for it. And if I really
Yeah.
felt a student um was passionate about it, I'd be like absolutely. But I suppose I wouldn't feel comfortable myself. Like I like to I enjoy writing fiction and things like that, but I don't know. Under those, because you don't know what question you're going to get either, and it's
Yeah.
trying to come up with a story in that kind of time. I don't know. I think a personal essay would be a safer choice, but yeah, I don't know. But maybe, you know, who
I
knows?
mean, it's the most fun part of the paper, so I just think it's nice to be able to sit and write a story, even if it's not the best
No, of course,
story.
yeah,
Although
no, yeah,
saying that, you probably would get better marks for the other ones because I do remember
yeah,
I would just make up stories, and then I realized when we did our mocks, they read out, people that got the highest marks, and some of the people had basically, I would say, plagiarized stories I had written during the year. They'd learnt off how to write that story,
yeah,
and then they were presenting this, and they probably did the same in their leaving cert. And I just thought that was art artistically wrong, so I wasn't going
yeah,
to do it. But
yeah. Well, like our teacher told us when I was in school, he said, have a skeleton of a story, and then when you go in, then that's when whatever the question is, you can adjust, and you put the muscles on it then.
okay,
So I always thought that, and that's what I do tell my students. But I don't know, I find that the thing they always go for is the big match or like something like that, kind of a story that, yeah, I don't know, just maybe is too much going on, too many characters, and that kind of thing. Like, it's a short story, especially, and the Leaving Cert short story really isn't a short story. It's more like long flash fiction, if anything, because You
Yeah.
know, a short story would be what, 2,500 words, maybe 4,000 words, whereas they're kind of only writing four A4 pages. You know, so it's a tough one to get right in that space of time. But no, I would never discourage. Probably isn't the right word, but maybe guide them, you know, towards something else might be a
Yeah.
better way of
Yeah.
looking at it. But yeah, um, uh, did I see as well on your website just about because I wanted to ask as well just about actually, oh yeah, the one question I wanted to ask was, do you find it tougher writing for children or for adults?
Um, I think it's the same thing. Just like I wouldn't have written the book think well, because I was asked to write it in the beginning, by someone, and then I kind of drafted it and I kept working on it after they didn't want it in the end. But I didn't find it difficult, but don't find writing difficult. I think to meet my own standards, maybe children's fiction for me doesn't allow me to talk about some of the things that I am interested in. It would be maybe difficult content for kids, not necessarily what they want to be reading. I was very conscious with that book that I wanted it to be a comedy because I just thought, I went and looked at loads of young adult books and they were so gloomy and kind of issue based, and I didn't want it to be issue based. So that book is the plot in it is a bit ridiculous, and it is a full on comedy about some pet chickens, and accidental vegan society and an accidental uh, social media chicken genocide thing. All this kind of wild antics happens in it. But that was a very conscious decision that I did wanted to be funny, because I do remember that at that age when I was going through quite a lot, or that kind of thing, I loved funny books, and always did love funny books like Roald Dahl or Adrian Mole, or I'm trying to think of the other ones. But there wasn't actually a whole Angus Thongs and Perfect Snogging. These books that were just so funny. A lot of them were diary entry actually type things. They seemed more honest to me because they were that teenage voice, which is a little bit maybe questions everything, which lends itself to humor because they are trying to become something completely different from what they are. So they get themselves, and we all get ourselves at that age, into fairly ridiculous situations.
Yeah. I suppose yeah, it's more young adult than it's probably older. I just know that when you mentioned Roald Dahl there, actually that's why I wanted to ask the question because he once said in an interview that he was asked, well, do you find it more difficult to write for children or adults? And he said, oh, children, way harder because you have to keep their attention, you know, and especially nowadays, I imagine it's only worse, you know, now with screens and things like that. You know, when he was writing, those things weren't really an
Yeah.
issue. Um,
Well, I suppose I was conscious with that book as well that nothing mattered but how funny it was for the kids, because you've lost them the minute it's not
yeah.
funny. And one of the nicest things was getting this like a lovely letter from this young girl. I think she submitted it for her school from some library thing, but she had read it and she wrote to me about her brother and what the book meant to her, and she thought it was a perfectly normal teenager in the book, which I would question, but it's that kind of age group. And it was just such a innocent letter, and it was very cute to receive. So probably and she painted a picture and everything that she put in the envelope with it, which was so much cuter than the responses you get to poetry, maybe.
Yeah, well, that's nice. It's good that she related to it, I suppose, as well, you know, by the sounds of things. So, very good. There was other things I wanted to ask you here now, because we only have about 10 minutes left, so I wanted to make sure that we did all the things. Oh yeah, so one of the interesting things actually that struck me was when we were emailing, and you said, because obviously we were having conversations the night we met, and we were talking about different poets and things like that. And one of the things you said in email was you were surprised because, or not, maybe not surprised, but you were saying a lot of poets that like would go to say performance poets and poets that would go to say open mic night and stuff, they wouldn't actually read a lot of poetry. What gives you? Is there? like what would give you that impression from, or like would they talk about, say, oh, I wouldn't really read a lot yourself, or what do you think on that? What's your
Well,
thought?
yeah, because I mean, when you're speaking to poets that read a lot, they start talking about the books they're reading, and they know who you're speaking about when you talk about something you've read or who those poets are. So the conversation goes very naturally or smoothly because there's a common interest there. And I think sometimes at an open mic type situation, you have a lot of people who like like it's a more a mental health based activity or a community based activity, which I love as well. Like I started out in um, spoken word, but I think I was always a reader first, and I do know some kind of spoken word people who've told me they don't really read, and that's not to say that's all. Um, but there is I don't know if you found that at all in those kinds of circles. Like there's a kind of a vague awareness of some of the maybe big names in poetry, but they don't have what you normally find with readers, which is a lot of niche interests, and you might not necessarily know this whole rabbit hole they've read their way down, but it's very interesting to listen to it because you pick up, I suppose, what I would find in book clubs and stuff, book recommendations and things like that from other readers. And I think it takes a reader to know a reader because uh, you can't really fake that. It's a lifelong sort of pursuit, and there's not really. I mean, not everybody gets excited about books. I had a friend recently. I was on a call with her, and she writes a lot of poetry, but she doesn't really read. And she started reading the Mary Oliver Handbook, and she was like, "Oh my God, it's so boring." I couldn't. I just had to say, well, that's your feeling about it. But I mean, that book is not what I would describe as boring.
I suppose, yeah, I think there's a book for everyone. I suppose it's just if they find, because some books, like if I start reading a book, I'm gonna finish it. And sometimes if it's boring me, it might be a slog. It could be on my bedside table for months, but I will get through. But then there's books. Like I remember, I picked up Dead as Doornails by Anthony Cronin, and I flew through that in 2 days. Whereas, like,
It's very small, though.
well, yeah, no, but it was like 300 pages or so. So, yeah, I don't know. Well, look,
I was
yeah,
thinking of, like those
oh, those
the,
bricks,
the
bricks.
tomes, like the
Yeah.
fall and rise of the Roman Empire or
Oh
something.
gosh, oh no, no.
I would abandon this sort of a thing pretty easy. But I also think that's another thing is that there's a notion of right books. And I think a lot of times when people don't read a lot, they've maybe been only exposed to what they should like through school or whatever. And that can actually have been a deeply traumatizing experience for them, depending on their teachers, where they grew up, how they were perceived in school, the groups they were in. And then later, to come back and sort of reclaim that identity and find poets you like. And like, where do you even start? You would have to have been educated to know where to start. The information is not that easy to get. And maybe you'd look up, a few of the big poets now, and you might find you don't like them, and you might not realize there is, like, I always advise young readers or people who want to get into poetry to get the Blood Axe anthologies, because if they get those, they're going to find somebody they like in there. They're going to find, probably not just one, but many poets that they can go and look then for collections and other things to read.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah. And I think as well, it's sad, even just on the Leaving Cert course. I think there's not enough. Like I love the Irish poets and things like that, and Sylvia Plath and things. But I feel like they could be bringing in poets from Asia, Africa. There's such an
Yeah.
opportunity there to spread out, and I think that's missed out a bit. Um, but I do want to. We have 5 minutes left, so maybe we could. Would you be up for reading another poem from the collection? Maybe we could. Just to
Yeah.
maybe wrap things up. Yeah. Is there anyone in particular, or were we?
Um, I can read the last one. I could read something shorter either. The first poem, I never read that late.
Actually, I wrote that down actually because I did actually like that poem. And I thought it was really cool. The first poem. And are you talking about the first poem of the collection or the poem, the first poem?
No, I'm talking about Split, the very first poem in the book.
Oh,
Or you want the first poem? I never read that either.
I
Either I
like that
can
one.
read
Yeah, page 70. Yeah, that was a
page
cool one.
70. Yeah. The first poem. It wasn't written in ancient calligraphy or etched on tall stones. It wasn't spoken in hushed tones underneath the stars. There was no bonfire leaping in the dark. All we can ever know is that we missed it. busy feeding ourselves and building things while it was happening at the mouth of a river. The clouds showed up, the grass nodded its head, the wind said a few words as the poem passed through. It was only later, when we came to the water and stood in the shallows, that we felt its absence. We did what we always do and got down on our knees and tried to capture it. But the first poem was deep in the ocean and clear light ran through our fingers.
I think that should have been the first poem in the collection.
Well, you'd have to speak to my editor.
Oh, I never thought of it actually. Yeah, did the editors they say no, this should be here and that should be there?
No, he didn't actually. I put that where it is. I put split at the beginning because it was more like an introduction to the thematic nature of the book, and then that portion of the book, the part 4, is kind of that coming out of yourself into the world. And so the first poem seemed appropriate there because one of the ways that we find solace is poetry, books, all these kinds of different things. It's different for everyone, but for me, that seemed like the most sensible place to put that poem because it is part of the lift at the end that I felt was happening.
I did feel that actually, yeah. Part 4 opens with just real sort of like you can sort of sense you found your voice, you know. There's just no sort of you know, you're very assured sounding in library, which I think is nice. Unfortunately, I don't think we've only about 2 minutes left, so we don't have time. But look, if anyone is interested, What Remains the Same by Alvy Carragher, and you can find her other books as well on her website, alvycarragher.com or .ie.com, .com, I think.
I have no idea. I think it's .com.
If you look up Alvy Carragher,
I think if you Google me, nobody else has my name, so it should be pretty obvious.
Yeah, true. Well, anyway, Alvy, thank you for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure. And look forward to the collection of short stories, which I'm sure will be down the line anyway, and other future collection of poems. And it's been great to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Bye now.